Are we going to experience some form of ultimate disaster? Will we have worldwide floods, major earthquakes? Perhaps an unexpected collision with planetary debris will trigger the ultimate catastrophe.
These things happen. They've happened in the past. We could expect them to happen again. And it may be that the timing is that we're going to see an event such as this.
Is it possible that a cataclysmic event could occur that would affect the entire human race? Could this ultimate disaster happen in our lifetime?
This series presents information based in part on theory and conjecture. The producer's purpose is to suggest some possible explanations, but not necessarily the only ones, to the mysteries we will examine.
We tend to think of catastrophic events occurring on a limited regional basis, not worldwide. Yet the yearly toll of destruction by earth, air, fire, and water is immense. Earthquakes have been on the increase around the globe since 1976. In that year alone, more than 800,000 people lost their lives, and millions of dollars worth of property was destroyed. In one day in 1974, tornadoes killed or injured 6,300 people and left $600 million worth of damage in 13 states. Serious volcanic eruptions have occurred in 4 regions of our planet so far this past year. 200 square miles of the Pacific Northwest were devastated by the eruption of Mount St. Helens in 1980. Nearly 300 people were caught by a tidal wave at Hilo, Hawaii in 1960. Property damage amounted to more than $40 million. In 1979, 200 people were killed by a giant wave in Indonesia. Are these disasters merely a prelude to larger events that may occur? Experts were asked if an ultimate disaster could be a part of our future. Some find this a very real possibility. Archaeologist, geologist Jeffrey Goodman, author of We Are the Earthquake Generation.
What is coming up for the future? This has always been a theme. The Bible has talked about it. It seems that in the close of every millennium, people are particularly concerned. At the end of, when 1000 AD was coming up, people were concerned that that was going to be the end of the world. And since then, I think Western society is particularly sprinkled with ideas about there's going to be a big event. It may be that as we're moving towards an ice age, which a lot of climatologists believe we are, that the amount of ice and snow cover in the North Pole area will get so great, and also in the South Pole, that it will contribute to the instability of the Earth. And we know that large earthquakes do move the Earth on its axis. And it may be a combination of forces of the instability from the ice and snow cover, the striking of a meteor, large quakes causing jostling, a number of factors coming together to produce what I think is, or has been referred to as the ultimate event, and that's the Earth actually turning over in space, turning on its hinges.
The Stell Group is a new community established in the farmlands south of Chicago under the leadership of Richard Kenninger. One of their concerns is how to deal with the catastrophe they feel may occur at the turn of the century. Physicist Tim Wilhelm, Stell's vice president, describes the 3 factors they feel could cause the ultimate disaster.
The south polar ice mass would begin increasing in size and weight and would do so in an off-center fashion. In other words, it would not all be equally balanced around the axis, rotational axis of the Earth, but it would be offset. And just like putting balancing weights on a tire, if your tire on your car is out of balance, it tends to make it jump and bounce. And this supposedly would have the same effect. This off-center mass of ice would cause what's called the Earth's precessional wobble. The Earth precesses as it rotates. It also wobbles slightly. And with this heavy weight on one side, it would cause that to exaggerate slightly. That exaggerated wobble would put a stress force on the crust of the Earth.
The second factor is the cooling in the core of the Earth.
As with all physical matter, as it cools, it shrinks. Now, the plastic underlayment, the mantle of the Earth, being more fluid-like or plastic-like, can shrink at a continual rate. But the crust of the Earth is rigid and cannot readily conform to this shrinking mantle. And what happens is as the underlayment is shrinking away, you get sort of a buckling of the crust, which along fault lines there are instabilities. And to equalize, the crust will shift, and that is what an earthquake is.
Fault lines form a web covering every area of the Earth. The third factor,
The predicted planetary alignment, which is to occur on or near the date May 5 of the year 2000. Now, this planetary alignment will not be a super straight line of all the planets through space. There will be several of the farther out planets off at about 90 degrees, but most of what are termed the visible planets will be in a fairly straight line shot through the heavens. Now, it's been calculated many times over that when all the planets line up, the gravitational distortion that's created, the added gravitational pull, is not necessarily strong enough to have any major effect. But there have been studies done which show that the sun and the moon lining up alone can cause the Earth's crust to heave by more than a foot up and down, and it creates literal tides in the crust of the Earth. So gravitation does have some effect. So with the instability caused by this added wobble due to the ice mass being off-center and growing, plus the instability of the crustal arches being somewhat buckled due to the cooling and shrinking of the Earth, you add this final hair trigger at the right point in time, and that would trigger a chain of geological, geophysical events, which could be termed a cataclysm.
The interesting thing, in the last 10 years, within the professional field of geology, geologists are resorting more and more to catastrophic explanations to explain how the Earth got to be the way it is, to explain why mountain ranges are there and why there are changes and why there are certain river basins and such. We now talk about how the glaciers once careened across the state of Washington to scour out the topography of lakes and scablands that we see in the central part of the state. We talk about periods of time when there were volcanic eruptions going around the Earth, the whole planet at once. All the volcanoes were spouting during the same period of time. We're talking about how meteors have periodically hit the Earth. The latest current theory is from Dr. Alvarez at UCLA, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, who says that the Earth was hit by a meteor or an asteroid 65 million years ago. This more or less turned the lights out on the Earth. There was a big cloud of dust. We know that was so because we have the element iridium that only comes from outer space, found in all the geological layers around the Earth. And we think that this event was responsible for the extinction of the dinosaurs. That suddenly, the dinosaurs didn't slowly die out, but they suddenly, catastrophically died out. And there was a great event that took place. And the thing that is a little unnerving to me is that we're seeing that it's much more the rule now, and we're seeing more and more catastrophic events having to explain things. In our space shots, we've gone off to Mars. What were we greeted with? Earthquakes. Since then, we thought all the volcanoes on Mars were extinct. Turns out there are active volcanoes on Mars. We went by Saturn, and we passed by its little satellite, its little moon, Io. There were 7 volcanic eruptions going off at once. So I think we, in professional geology, have woefully underplayed the role of catastrophic events. And as we're finding out about the realities events, it makes the traditional views, the psychic views, the intuitive views, that much more real, that much more possible.
Could a catastrophic event be already building in our own western United States in the form of a major earthquake? Scientists are studying new information, hoping to find the answer before it is too late.
We know that there's bulging going up and down in the Palmdale area of California. We know there have been swarms of earthquakes there. We know that San Diego has recently experienced earthquakes, and the fault lines that we thought stopped along the coastline actually come on and go right through downtown San Diego.
The San Andreas Fault slashes across 700 miles of California. It creates a volatile earthquake zone stretching between San Diego and San Francisco.
Up in San Francisco, there's a great deal of change that has taken place within the last 2 years, and that the San Andreas Fault in that area is now changed the nature of its pressure. It's been under compression. That means the two parts of the fault have been pressing against each other, and it's been very hard to have an earthquake there while they're pressing against, because for an earthquake you need one chunk of rock to slide past another very quickly, and this gives you your tremendous energy release. But right now they have noticed that the fault is actually in expansion. The two halves are coming apart, and that's going to make it much, much easier to have a big earthquake occur there.
Some scientists believe in the interconnection of geophysical events. Earthquake activity may release power from deep within the earth, resulting in volcanic eruption.
We just had the eruption of Mount St. Helens, and we have always known that the Cascade Range is a very dangerous range. It's a very young mountain range. We've looked at St. Helens, which was really a pipsqueak of a volcanic eruption. There have been eruptions at Tambora that have been hundreds of times as large. And indeed, just 6,000 years ago, there was a Mount Mazama. Remember Mount Mazama? Well, it was where Crater Lake is now. And literally, the whole mountain blew up and threw ash as far east as into the plain states of Kansas and Nebraska.
Given the very real possibility of a catastrophic event, will we be given time to react to an approaching global disaster? Dr. Goodman believes there will be a series of events which serve as a warning sequence.
And it begins with a great deal of destruction to Japan, earthquakes, the island of Japan being really ravaged over. And then activity in Italy, Vesuvius, the volcano, it erupting, and then the activity moving over across the ocean to the Caribbean, where Mount Pelée is, on the Isle of Martinique, and then the west coast of the United States, California, being hit, and then the burners of the earth, so to speak, being turned up to high gear. We'd see the California coastline start to be crumbling away and be pushed back inland. And we'd see even warning earthquakes in such areas that we don't normally think of earthquakes, such as St. Louis, New York City, increasingly harsh weather patterns, food shortages in the U.S., and then by 1990 to 2000 would be the really devastating period. And here we're talking about earthquakes that would be literally over 10 on the Richter scale, bigger than anything anybody imagined.
Beyond the advent of the geological changes and hazards already identified, could it be that the ultimate catastrophe will come from outside the Earth itself?
Archaeological objects.
Zechariah Sitchin is the author of The 12th Planet and The Stairway to Heaven. He believes that the writings of ancient Sumerians, which tell a story of prehistoric catastrophe, may in fact foretell our future.
Fortunately, the Sumerians have left us not only very detailed writings which speak for themselves, but also pictorial evidence. This seal is very interesting. It actually depicts the whole solar system with the sun in the center, not the Earth, showing all the planets that are known to us today, plus one more between Mars and Jupiter, of which we are not aware. The planet which I call the 12th planet and which the ancient peoples called Marduk was caught in sun orbit into our solar system by having come out from outer space, was pulled in by the gravity force of all the other planets into the solar system and collided with another ancient member of the solar system called Tiamat. In the collision, Tiamat was split in two. One half of it became the asteroid belt and the comets, The other half, which was pushed into a new orbit, became the planet on which we live, planet Earth. Marduk itself, which was now caught into solar orbit, has adopted a very large, long elliptical orbit, almost comet-like, which brings it once every 3,600 years between Mars and Jupiter.
Is this possible? Could there be another planet in our system that approaches Earth every 3,600 years?
This basic tenet in my writings, which was central to the beliefs of the ancient peoples, that there is indeed one more planet in our solar system, has been in the past 2 years or so accepted in a way by astronomers, especially those at the U.S. Naval Observatory in Washington, who have concluded that there is indeed one large planet beyond Pluto.
Dr. Robert Harrington of the U.S. Naval Observatory does confirm the recent appearance of another planet orbiting beyond Pluto. This planet is believed to be 3 to 5 times larger than Earth.
Given then that such a planet indeed exists and that it may come and cause havoc in the future, it's very interesting to read the Sumerian evidence of what happened on one of those previous passages when the deluge took place on Earth. The first effect were a very strong wind and a darkened sky. The nearing of that planet and its gravitational pull have shifted the ice cap of Antarctica off the landmass of Antarctica, creating the huge tidal wave that has engulfed our globe and that has remained in human memory as the deluge or the great flood of the Bible, of Noah, and of the Sumerian tales.
Could Sumerian mythology be our history? Has our Earth actually been the victim of past global catastrophe? Would we be prepared to face an ultimate disaster? Dr. Jeffrey Goodman.
There are a lot of contingencies and ramifications that could take place should these types of events start to occur. And really, it doesn't need the whole place getting shaken up or torn up. 1 or 2 earthquakes will do just fine. I think this country stood and watched in amazement when we saw the earthquake that hit Italy.
November 23rd, 1980. An earthquake measuring 7.2 on the Richter scale devastated an area of south-central Italy, killing 3,000 people.
And we watched it on our news broadcast, and we were very sympathetic and empathetic, and we sent aid, and we said, boy, these poor people, they weren't ready to cope with this. The Japanese have admitted that they're in a great earthquake threat, and in the Tokyo area and along that coastline from outside of Tokyo, they already have named the big quake. They call it the Tokai quake, and they expect it to come soon, and they're talking about tremendous loss of life, 250,000 homes being lost, tremendous destruction from fire, tremendous loss from a resultant tidal wave that would come with the event, and they're making very, very definite preparations. They've put up enough food and water to supply Tokyo for 10 days. They're spending a tremendous amount of money on preparedness. And similarly, now here in this country, we have various groups that have been putting out newsletters, monitoring all the information, and getting together to move to certain areas or within the area they are, become better prepared for the possibility of an event.
One purpose of the STEL group is to develop a new self-sufficient culture that would survive following a catastrophe. Tim Wilhelm.
One of the ways we see of doing that is developing as many capabilities right here within the community as we can. For example, we have our own water treatment plant, which is a reverse osmosis system, the kind used for desalinating seawater. We also are working under a grant from the U.S. Department of Energy, developing a community-sized fuel alcohol plant. Obviously, a task of this nature is incredible in scope and a very ambitious undertaking, to say the least. And we've looked at alternatives like building concrete bunkers and going underground for a while, and we've also looked at the alternative of lifting above the surface of the Earth in some sort of an aircraft or hovercraft or hovering aircraft, whatever you choose to call it. And we don't know what it is yet. We're just looking at that as the possible alternative.
Technological advancement in the last 100 years is remarkable. We have developed machinery to aid us in our physical labor, computers to augment our minds. There have been incredible advances in communication and medicine. We've landed on the moon, on Mars, and on Venus. We're sailing into the far reaches of our solar system. Modern technology has carried us into an era of wonders. Tomorrow holds endless promise, yet it is clouded by a threat. Some scientists feel that we may face cataclysmic events in our lifetime. Given that possibility, there are those who believe that some of our technological resources must be applied toward mankind's survival of the ultimate disaster.
Apart from a catastrophe on Earth, limited or due to our own position in the heavens and the fact that another planet comes periodically, is there something in the solar system, perhaps in the whole universe, that keeps repeating itself? That a civilization arises, life can become possible, evolve on a planet, a stage arises, there's a very high civilization, but it brought its own ruin, perhaps, on itself, and then somebody gets into spaceships and goes to another planet and starts it all over again. In other words, is the past the future?